Hey guys, Omar here, and after playing with the Nikon Z6 II for a whole month, I kind of had to get my own. Alright, so after I took the Nikon Z6 II out of the box, I started changing all these settings, and then I said, let me make a list so I could share with everyone. In case you have the camera, here are the top things I change. You don't have to change all of these, but it may give you some ideas. And all these changes are based on my usability so far as a Nikon rookie. These may change in the future. And if they do, it's okay. Okay, as soon as you put a battery in the camera, you're gonna notice in the corner, there's a little annoying flashing thingamabob. You better set your date and time because that will flash forever. Next, I put a CF Express card in the camera. If you're broke, you could put an SD card in there. That'll both work. Now, the first thing I noticed is that the camera said it could take 10,000 photographs, and that told me right away that those images are going to be really small. So strangely, by default, the camera is set to like little JPEG. Maybe Nikon wants your first wedding to be a complete disaster. So if you dive into the camera menu under image, what is it called? Image quality, scroll up and you'll see the RAW settings. I set mine to RAW and JPEG because I want to see what the JPEGs are doing as a new Nikon shooter. Okay, the next thing that's set to default is the screen is set to touch and shoot. So if your skin just happens to graze the screen, it will shoot pictures. So you just, right here on the screen, you just touch, and I'd like to change it to position the focus point because that's convenient too. You can set your focus point, but it won't shoot a photograph. Now, by the way, it is kind of cool to shoot a photograph and focus when you want to shoot stealthily. You set it to full silent mode, the camera, and focus and shoot. You know, you could pretend you're touching the screen. You can get some cool stealthy pictures on the street or of your kids when they don't know. So that's a cool little pro hack right there. All right, next I dove into the F5 menu because coming from Canon and also on my Sony camera, shutter speed is the front dial for me always. It's always been the front dial, but Nikon does it a little backwards. Their shutter is the rear dial. So in the F5 menu, I customized the command dial for exposure. Just go to F5 and reverse it. Turn exposure setting on to reverse and make your shutter dial the front. Or maybe just leave it. Maybe I'm the weird one. I'm a back button focuser. So in the A6 menu, I took focus off the shutter and I changed it to be the AF on button only. Next, I customized some of the buttons on the camera. Now they're not all customizable. Some of these I wish down here were customizable, but from the ones that are, I customized them based on my usage on other cameras. So some of these might not make sense to you, but like, for example, the first one. By the way, this is in the F2 menu, Customize Controls. So for shooting stills, I made my little movie record button here be my white balance changer because that's the button it is on all my other cameras. You can change your white balance and other settings, by the way, by using the little I button here. It'll pop up this little menu at the bottom. But I like changing camera settings when the camera is up to my eye. So the camera is almost like an instrument where I can change white balance or shutter or any kind of focus mode without having to pull the camera. It just took a shot. Without having to pull the camera away from my face. Now I customized the little joystick to reset my little focus mode always to the center. This is useful if, by the way, your touch focus is on. The focus little box will sometimes like end up in the corner annoyingly. And so having that little push will send it right to the middle, which is a cool feature. Now my F1 and F2, the two front function buttons, those settings were based on all recommendations I saw everywhere. Pretty much everyone that has a Z camera seems to do this, but the top button, if you hold it down, is so I can change my focus modes. So if I use the rear dial, that will change from single to continuous to manual. And if I hold that top button and use the front dial, that will change and cycle through all the options, like a little center focus point or face detection or that stuff. So that's been really convenient. Now, one cool thing you could do is limit the choices. If you don't want to have animal detection, you hate animals, for example, or you don't need pinpoint, which is good for doing macro or, really being detailed. Those two I removed. I also removed dynamic. From all the videos I've seen, dynamic is sort of like a legacy mode from the DSLRs. So I've removed that one as well. And the bottom function button, my F2 button, in the F2 menu, I'm going to choose that to be subject tracking. So now when I press that function button, I get a little tracking box. And this you can point to at anything. You get a little yellow confirmation, and if you move your camera, it will still track that object. You see, no matter where, it'll sort of track that object. So that is set to my front function button 2, and if I press it again, it gets rid of that, and now I have normal autofocus. Okay, what's next? In the A11 menu, the built-in autofocus green annoying light, I turn that off. Next, C3, image review. By default, it's 4 seconds. That means the picture's up there for 4 seconds, but you don't want anyone to see your picture, you want to be all discreet. So I set it to 2 seconds. By the way, you don't always need image review because you're shooting a mirrorless camera, and what's great about mirrorless cameras is you already see your exposure, if it's too bright or it's too dark. So I turn my playback off a lot of times. And by the way, my playback is set. If I go to the playback menu, there's 2 things I change on the playback menu. One of them is that my playback is the monitor only, the LCD. To me, the Z camera's playback is just slightly delayed. It's not really quick like some of my other cameras. So when I'm shooting with playback, it's sort of slowing me down. So I like playback on the back. Now, why do you need playback? I need playback if I'm shooting flash. I want to see if the flash exposure is correct. So instead of reaching over and hitting the play button, I get an automatic, hey, my flash is working. But it's only on the LCD, not the EVF. And the other thing I changed in the playback menu is to flip horizontal photos. If you go to the playback menu, it's called tall. They call it tall image. Turn it off so it doesn't rotate your vertical images, and you can actually see them this way. Next, by default, the camera's picture style. The picture style is like what the JPEG looks like. It could be vivid or portrait or standard. By default, it's set to auto. That means the camera picks your picture style for your JPEG. So I switched that to portrait, which I like. The next thing I did was I set up my menu. Now, my menu items should be the things you use most often. Things that you don't want to kind of remember which menu they're in. The first one I put on there was the format memory. The first one I put on there was format memory card, because I do that all the time. 2, apply settings to live view. Apply settings to live view, I turn it on when I want to see my exposure, but I turn it off if I'm shooting in low light, or also if I'm shooting flash. I don't really need it. I don't need it to show me my ambient. If I'm shooting flash, a lot of times I use the exposure needle, 1 stop down, 2 stops down. So I like to have it handy, live, you know what I'm saying. Third is airplane mode. One thing you should do when you first get the camera, I probably should have said this first, is check for a firmware update. You can update your firmware using the app, the SnapBridge app made by Nikon. And the other great thing about the Nikon app is if you shoot photographs on vacation, you can have them automatically be transferred, small ones, be transferred to your phone, which is great for sharing or just when you're at the restaurant looking at photos. So hook your camera up to the SnapBridge app and also update your firmware. That's something that's really important. In my menu, going back to my menu, I have airplane mode as one of the options in case I don't want it to transfer any photos. And last, image review on off. Sometimes I don't want to have image review on, especially if I'm shooting in natural light. I already know what the photo is going to look like. So, image review on off. Next, my file naming. This is so out of order. My God, this should have been an early one. Under the camera menu, you can choose what you want to call your files. I always like calling them what the camera's name is. So my files that come from this camera are called Z6 II. Thank you. All right, so what do you change on your Nikon Z camera? Put it in the comments below so we can all learn. All right, I hope you liked this video. I hope that helped. I'll see you next time.